Hello Mindbar community, and welcome to Module 2, Understanding the Tasks of Mourning. If you have any familiarity with grief or the different ways that we really conceptualize the grief process, you may know the term stages of grief. That was founded by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who companioned individuals on their deathbeds. And she found 5 stages of the grief process that dying individuals experience before death. That, in our American culture, has translated to everyone grieving experiences these 5 feelings, and they are in order, and then when you're done, you're done. That was not her intention. And so in response to that, William Worden founded 4 tasks of mourning that kind of put the feelings that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross founded into a bucket of tasks rather than feelings, because not everybody feels the same thing in grief. Not everybody feels anger. That's the truth. Not everyone feels acceptance. That is definitely true. And so what we want to think about the different tasks of mourning is not that we do them in a linear order. Of course, there's task 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you won't experience them with task 1 for 30 days or task 4, and then you're done forever. The truth is that grief is ever evolving. And so these tasks will represent themselves as we understand our grief differently. As our relationship with our grief changes, we're going to visit these tasks again and again for the rest of our lives. No, they won't always be loud. They won't always be the only thing we're doing, which in the beginning of grief, we often are consumed by these tasks. But throughout our life, we are typically able to pinpoint what task are we working on right now. It's a lifelong process, and it's transformative. If you haven't experienced it, I encourage you to be open to that transformation. So let's dig into the 4 tasks of mourning. The first task that William Worden established is accepting the reality of the loss. We're going to touch more deeply on this process in Module 3. But for right now, we're going to talk about the disbelief that occurs when a loved one's life has ended. This is something that our brains have a really hard time understanding, because human brains are puzzle makers. They're storytellers. So when we have an idea of what our life is going to look like, our brain puts that into a very specific order that makes sense. Usually it includes our loved ones being there with us throughout our entire lives. When that doesn't happen, when a life is cut short, and when the plan that we made has no real way of coming to fruition, our brains get disrupted. They get confused. They need a lot of repetition to remember that this loss is real, it happened, and rebuild that storyline around that loss. And so unfortunately, during this task, we find ourselves revisiting the story over and over and over, and it is exhausting. And it makes us feel like we are stuck in our grief. Luckily, you're not stuck. We never get stuck, as long as we are continuing to be open to the process. So our brains need to work to be reminded of the reality, and so we'll continue to be reminded by retelling our story over and over and over until we no longer need to do that. Prior to this, you might find yourself driving home and looking for your loved one's car. You might hear a funny story and pick up your phone to call your loved one to tell them that story. This shows that your brain still needs a little bit of help to understand that this really happened and that rebuilding a new story is necessary. The second task can be rough. Process the pain of the loss. This one is so difficult because our society doesn't lend itself well to the act of processing through pain. Usually we are given a lot of timelines about grief, like Your work might give you 2 or 3 days of bereavement leave, and then when you come back, you're expected to be done. Or after a year, your grief should be resolved. So what happens if that year passes and you still feel deep, deep feelings of grief? So processing the pain helps us move through our grief process, but it's not natural and it is not reinforced by our culture. And so we have to often set aside time and set aside expectations of ourselves during that time. Processing the pain means allowing tears to come when they feel like coming. Unfortunately, sometimes that means that you're crying in the middle of a grocery store or on your drive home. I encourage you to pull over during that time. Don't suck it up. Don't pull the tears back. Don't swallow that lump in your throat. Talk about it. Find somebody, call somebody who you know will let you be heard. Processing the pain of grief is essential. Crying doesn't make you weak. Talking about them doesn't mean you're stuck. It means that you have further processing to do. The third task is adjusting to the world without your loved one. And as you can imagine, this is not something that you just do. You have never lived in a world without them. Think about the loss of a mother. Individuals who lose a mom have literally never existed on this planet without their mother. So it takes a bit of time to start understanding how to live without that person. Think about the loss of a spouse. You never, when you marry a person, imagine life without them, because through the act of marriage, you imagine your life with them forever. So what happens when that person is gone? Our brains have to rewrite that story, and we have to figure out, who are we without them? What does this look like? How do I do this? Do I want to? These are hard things. And so this task really allows individuals who are in grief to look at the world and wonder what it looks like without that person. And it's not something that happens overnight. That is a lifelong task. The last task is to find an enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. So this looks like forward movement. And I'll share a little bit about myself in regard to this task. My boyfriend died in a car accident, and I grieve him continuously throughout my life. But what I have done is embark on a new life that would not have existed had he not died in that car accident. I maintain my connection with him by working with grievers and helping to companion them through this very difficult time that I have lived. I believe deeply that I have worked on task 4, but on the anniversary of his death every year, I am back at processing the pain, and on his birthday or on big events that he never got to experience, like the birth of my child, I have to adjust to the world without him again. These tasks happen over and over and over again. And I want to leave you with a little imagery that I share with my grief clients that really help put these tasks into a good framework. So picture yourself as a vase, a really pretty vase, but perfect. And so you are the vase. Grief happens, the loss happens, and you as the vase are pushed onto the floor. And what you are left with is a shattered mess. At first, you are in shock that you are broken all over the floor. That is task 1, accept the reality of the loss. So you are staring at this pile of beautiful vase all over the floor. You can't believe it's real. How is it possible that I'm in pieces all over the floor? It's going to take you time to really understand that this happened. That's on the floor right now. That's a mess. Then, as you begin to accept that this happened, you're going to feel panic. You're going to feel pain. You're going to feel wildly upset that you as this vase are all over the floor, shattered. How will you ever put it back together? That is processing the pain. You're going to pick up these pieces. You're going to stare at the pieces of you on the floor that you'll never have again. The plans that you made, and you're going to cry and you're going to scream and maybe throw more pieces of the vase all over the place. Processing the pain is messy. But then comes task 3, adjusting to the world without the deceased. So we start to pick up pieces of the vase and we look at this piece. Let's say this piece of you is the one who made dinner every night because my husband loved it when I made dinner every night. You look at that piece and you wonder, is this a piece I want to put back on my vase as I repair it? And this is your opportunity to leave certain parts of yourself on the floor. When you rebuild and you embark on a new life without your loved one while maintaining that connection, you're gonna put the vase back together, but it's not gonna look the same and it's not gonna have all the pieces because they don't always apply. Wife, you can put that back on if that's the identity that means the most to you. But equally, you can leave that on the ground. It's up to you. You are rebuilding. As this vase gets put back together and you get put back on the shelf, there is a beautiful proverb that talks about the cracks in a vase being filled with gold. And it makes the vase so much more beautiful. And more than just a vase, but rather a work of art. I truly believe that grief is a transformative process that made me a more deeply feeling, special person who has the ability to walk with others through their own grief processes. That is a beautiful, broken, golden vase. I hope that you can find a way to work through the different parts of your mourning. And as you do that, come along with me to Module 3, where we're going to talk about how our different emotions are helping us work on our tasks of mourning.